All right, joining me now from American Truckers United is Shannon Everett and Harvey Beek. And there was a story a few months back that I was covering, and I ended up getting in touch with them. It happened in Austin. But there's been a couple of these stories where you have non-citizen illegal immigrant truck drivers. And you're saying, well, how did they end up on the road? And then they end up killing people. And so were they ever qualified to drive those trucks? And then specifically, this story in Austin gets even crazier. Bond reduced for truck driver in fatal I-35 crash from $1.2 million to $7,000. And this is just wild stuff. Originally with 7 felony accounts related to driving while intoxicated. And then they lowered his bail. And his bond was only $1,000 with new pretrial conditions imposed. So this is a wild story. And then some of the latest news: freight fraud, cargo theft, deadly collisions, ghost carriers are growing national security threat. And so I realized covering these stories, and I said, well, now wait a second. It seems like there is something afoot here where they're trying to bring in foreign truck drivers and replace American truck drivers because obviously they don't have to pay them nearly as much. And so you had all these different portals. When you bring in 20 million people during the Biden years, you had all these different portals, and so you could hire these non-citizens to be ride share drivers or work all these different jobs, apparently including truckers, where there are obviously a lot of things that go into hiring a trucker. You can't just show up and be a trucker. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and it's a very important job, quite frankly. So joining me to discuss this now, Shannon and Harvey from American Truckers United. And when we first made touch, it sounded like my directional thinking here of, hey, this is part of an agenda to replace American truckers with foreigners. You guys are well aware of this. Break it down for me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having us on, Owen. Huge fan of your show, and just glad to be here sharing this information. And so that's exactly right. You know, a lot of people say that the trucking industry right now is going through a 3-year freight recession. And our message is it's not a freight recession at all. It's actually the effects of a replacement cycle. We are seeing the American truck driving community being replaced by people on work visas from foreign countries. And all of this has really, the door kind of opened to this in 2016 with a memorandum that allowed truck drivers who didn't speak English to no longer be placed out of service and taken off of the highways. But we really saw it explode under the Biden administration in 2021 when they started issuing non-domicile commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens. I've been doing this for 25 years. My friend Harvey, he's been doing it for a little bit longer than myself. And, we're second and third generation guys. And so, our parents before us are very experienced in this too. Never before has the state DMVs issued commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens. So this is definitely a new situation. It's a new crisis in the country, and we're currently facing a highway safety epidemic as a result.
Well, is it a situation now where it's not just Americans that want to get involved in moving freight can't get a job? Are people that have been hauling freight for years also losing work?
Yes, sir. There's been, American legacy trucking companies that have been in business for over 50 years that have already gone by the wayside because of this government intervention and this rapid influx of what we refer to as artificial supply of a bunch of third world slave wage trucking capacity that has no regard for our regulations that we're all having to compete with.
Well, and a lot of people probably don't understand the ins and out of the trucking industry or freight. It is a highly competitive industry, and it moves fast. And the people that move the fastest are the ones that get the jobs. But I am curious, do we know who's providing the trucks? Who's actually providing the trucks for these non-citizens? Do we know?
So that's a very interesting point too, because if we're going through a 3-year freight recession, And the American trucking industry is in a crisis, and we're struggling because we can't cover our cost of operations. And so you're seeing these legacy carriers that have been in business for 40 and 50 years go out of business. Wouldn't you think that there would be inventories of used commercial motor vehicles for sale on these dealer lots? And so that's not the case because they have this new market of buyers for all of the used trucks. And so we've heard several different scenarios. Some of them they've got cash buyers coming from the Middle East. Some of them they've got cash buyers coming out of other countries, but also some of your captive finance companies, your OEMs, where they have their own financing companies, are offering financing to all of these non-citizens. And so this attack on the American truck driver is being financed by someone, and that's one of the things we really haven't got to the root yet. Who's really behind that? Somebody's got to be behind the underwriting of the loans for that equipment. But absolutely, there is no inventory right now on used equipment because there is a willing buyer that is being pipelined into the country at a very high rate, and they're buying up these trucks just as fast as they can get them.
Well, we did discover, covering 4 years of the Biden border invasion, that they were subsidizing illegal aliens' house purchases. We found out that they were subsidizing their car purchases as well. This was right out of the government, by the way. This was a government agenda that they were subsidizing this. So, I mean, imagine that. You're an American citizen. You've been saving to buy a house for 10, 20 years, and then somebody crosses the southern border, gets a massive government subsidy, and then they can purchase that house at a higher price than you can. Do you think maybe that was going on with these trucks as well?
Owen, it's you mentioned the housing crisis, okay? There is a bubble that is going to burst somehow. And when the government rushed these buyers in here, the truck makers, they recognized the rapid increase in demand. And just like in the housing bubble, there was a bunch of grossly overpriced trucks, in this case, sold, and they were financed at what I would consider usury interest rates. And just to kind of give you some details, 450,000-mile Freightliner, in today's world, in a good market, retail, all things being relative, should be about an $85,000 to $90,000 truck. Well, starting in the
Would that be considered like entry level?
Yeah, for an owner operator, it's a second life entry level truck.
Yes, sir. Entry level truck that an owner operator a one truck buyer would buy to get into the industry. Those trucks were being sold for well north of $160,000 at triple the interest rates that legacy American carriers were getting. Brand new trucks at the time were being sold for $225,000 when folks like us that's been here buying trucks for years and years, we were still buying those brand new trucks for around $170,000. So the decisions that the unchecked lust and greed that was allowed to take place created this bubble that when the balance of supply and demand, when there became so much supply and freight rates started crashing, the financial institutions could not execute repossessions properly because it was cut so far and so wide that if they went and executed all the repossessions, they would collapse, just like the banks were collapsing back in 2008 during the housing crisis.
So they've actually been allowing a lot of these equipment buyers to defer their payments and not even making payments on the trucks that they bought.
Yeah, I was going to say, they just have to basically hold out hope that someday they're going to pay them, and it's like that's their only option. What about for the brokers? Are they searching out the cheapest freight haulers? Are they saying, okay, well, we know this guy is going to work for a lot less, and they know it's a foreigner? Is that what the brokers are doing?
Well, essentially, they're the ones that are really benefiting from this because they have this new pipeline of capacity. And so if you look at the brokerage industry and how it's grown over the same time period, you can see they're the ones that are really benefiting from this additional capacity. What's interesting about all these guys is all of these new drivers, these new entrants, whatever you want to call them, they can't work directly for the shipper because they don't have these direct relationships with these large shippers in the United States. And so it's all capacity that's going to the brokers. And so absolutely the brokers have capitalized on this. And so what you're really experiencing in the trucking industry is you have all these asset-based, the guys who have invested in all of the rubber and the metal and have, are multi-generational, typically trucking families, have been put at odds against a brokerage industry that has come up against them that typically only had capacity in the areas where the trucking industry wasn't strong. And so now they have this army of drivers and of trucks and are actually competing with the trucking capacity. We've seen all of that expand and grow with the introduction of this gig economy. You were talking about it earlier, the Uber drivers and the DoorDash drivers and so on and so forth. And that's exactly right. We've seen that come into the trucking industry with apps for loads and these new load boards and power only solutions. And it seems to be that industry, your Amazons of the world, they're using predominantly this new group of drivers, this gig economy of drivers, and they're no longer using your American-based American trucking companies that hire your American truck drivers.
So what they've done,
absolutely,
so what they've done is they've allowed a shortcut for these non-citizens that have come into the country under Joe Biden. They've allowed them a shortcut where an American trucker would have to go through the process of getting different freight gigs, working their way up to truck ownership, forming relations. They bring in these illegal citizens and they say, here's your shortcut. We'll subsidize you into the industry as a private truck owner, and then we'll give you immediate access with these new digital access platforms, these apps, where people can just hire you. You don't even need a relationship. And the American trucker basically just gets skipped because the brokers and the major freight liners are just saying, bottom line, this is cheaper.
That's right.
Exactly right. Oh, and I visited with a gentleman from Eastern Europe that has a company that's up in the Midwest. And what things look like right now is you have two ecosystems in the long haul trucking segment. You have companies that are owned by non-citizens or people from all over the world with their offices in the third world, and they're paying their office people 20 cents on the dollar compared to the American prevailing wage in our industry. And then they have imported all of their drivers from the third world that are here on some sort of indentured servitude type visa where they have to stay with the company for 3 to 5 years. And what it's produced is a cost structure about 60 cents a mile cheaper than what an American-owned company obeying our hours of service regulations and all of the other regulations.
Are these union regulations?
No, sir. I'm referring to the Department of Transportation and the Federal Motor Carrier
Safety. So they're letting non-citizens break these traditions?
Yes, sir. There has not been any regulatory enforcement in the last, I'm going to say, 4 to 5 years, and lawlessness. We currently have people in foreign countries hacking electronic logbooks in trucks on our soil for their drivers, forcing them to drive fatigued.
What about, is there a giant truckers union that could do something about this, or is it too dangerous of a game right now?
Well, no, the Teamsters, everybody always talks about the Teamsters and they think that they represent the trucking industry. And when in fact, only about 5% of the truckers today are a member of the Teamsters union because they only represent really your parcel and your LTL motor carriers. And so the majority of the trucking industry is made up of non-union members after deregulation back in the 80s. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is trying to bring back a collective voice for the American truck driver and the American trucking company, because there really has not been a voice at all in the trucking industry when it comes to the matter of immigration. There's two major associations, OOIDA and the American Trucking Association, and both of them have really been held captive because we've never seen them in the past take a position at all on this immigration issue, whether that comes to the enforcement of the English proficiency law that you saw Donald Trump sign on the executive order, or whether it comes to this non-domiciled CDL. Neither one of them are pushing back on that. In fact, the American Trucking Association was lobbying for the issuance of non-domiciled CDLs to non-citizens. And so when I say they've been held captive, I'm really talking about the American Trucking Association. It now includes a lot of members of private fleets, and that's where a shipper has their own trucking fleet. They've been included in that association, and they have the big money, and they control the policy. And so we don't want to be a part of an association that includes private fleets and shippers that are setting policy for your mom and pop American trucking companies.
Well, whoever made the decisions in the Biden administration, and really this logic needs to be applied to many different stories, but in this case, whoever was delivering these licenses to people that didn't even speak English probably didn't even know the laws of the road. I mean, do we even know if they were even passing the tests that truckers have to pass? I mean, they need to be held responsible. This situation in Austin was bad. I know there was one in California. I think I can recall 3 off the top of my head that resulted in death. And they were just handing out these licenses, just getting them jobs as fast as possible, undermining the American truckers. Now, the website, we do have a large trucking audience. If people want to get more information, americantruckers.com, americantruckers.com. I imagine there's your social, ATU Truckers, at ATU Truckers on X, another way to stay in touch with these guys. What does the Trump administration need to know? Who inside the Trump administration can right this wrong?
Well, so we're very appreciative because we believe that this message we know it got to Donald Trump's desk over the last 90 days. And, he issued the executive order on English proficiency. He also issued guidance asking for an investigation of the Department of Transportation into these non-domiciled CDLs and these foreign CDLs. I think the most important message for the Donald Trump administration is that we have to get these drivers off of the road. We have to restore safety to our highways. It's not enough to slap them on the wrist. It's not enough to give them a monetary fine that they're never going to pay. These people have taken advantage of a loophole and should have never been given a license in the first place. And so they need to revoke the non-domicile commercial driver's license that was abused by the Biden administration and reset the standard. We've talked about it in the legislation that we filed in the state of Arkansas. We need to reset the clock. We got to reset the clock back to the standard of the industry before all of this stuff was, the red tape was cut. They talked about reducing standards so they could issue all these things. We got to raise the standard back. We need to reset the standard. And so that's the message, is let's restore safety back to our roads by resetting the standard. You were talking about the accidents. You had the accident in Austin that killed 5 people. We've got an accident right now in Thomasville, Alabama, where a coach and a young woman was killed. We've got an accident right now in Florida where 2 road surveyors were killed. We got an accident right now in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where 2 individuals were killed. We've got an accident in West Virginia. This is all within the last 30 to 45 days. We've got an accident right now in West Virginia where a construction worker, young man, 25 years old, with a 5-month-old son, was run over and killed. In all of these cases that I'm describing to you, these were non-domiciled CDLs or foreign CDLs, and in almost every case, the guys could not even read or speak English and could not read the highway signs. And so we truly have a highway safety epidemic. These are only the cases that we've been able to find. This isn't our day job. We're running trucking fleets as our day job, and this is our part-time work to help these families and to help these truck drivers and these trucking communities. We believe there are thousands of these crashes out there, and we just don't have the man time or the hours to actually find all of these right now. And so we're going to be building that up. The association's really taken off, and we've got a great coalition now of some large carriers and smaller carriers that have come forward and providing resources. And so we're going to be staffing up our organization so that we're able to capture more of these accidents. But we're going to continue to fight this, and we really appreciate you helping us get this message out.
Yes, sir. And Owen, I'll be really quick because I want everybody to be very clear and understand. These non-citizens that have non-domiciled CDLs, they're completely unvetted. We don't know who they really are. We don't know what their driving records are. We don't know if they've ever even driven a car in their country of origin. And meanwhile, our American drivers are held to a standard to where I have to have a 3-year moving violations record in every file, or we're fined. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these people from all over the third world that we have no idea what kind of training they've received or what their driving records or criminal records are.
It's so typical, and it's unacceptable. Shannon Everett, Harvey Beek, I appreciate your time. Let's do this again when there's an update. Again, for people that want more information, americantruckers.com. And if you are a trucker listening, reach out there as well. Guys, thank you for your time. Thank you for this update. I imagine there'll be another update in the future. You have my contact. Stay in touch.
Thanks, Owen.
Thank you, Owen.
All right, there they go. A couple other odds and ends we may have time for before I sign off. Folks, remember to support us by shopping.